So this evening we are talking to yet another Commodorean, and this is Bil Herd. Hello, Bill.
Hi, how you doing? By the way, it's Commodore-ite.
Haha, okay. So, you are most known for being a senior hardware designer for Commodore before you left, and you also did work on various machines, among them the 128.
Yes.
That you also worked on with Dave Haynie,
right?
Which we also interviewed 2 years ago. So, would you tell us a bit more about you, though, for the people who don't know you exactly?
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that until I read Brian Bagnall's book about Commodore, that I had been hired as a technician and not an engineer, but I didn't much care. I didn't, they actually put me to work trying to write software, so it was like hired as a technician, wanted to be an engineer, but they sat me in a programmer's chair just because he was out that day for that week. But within about the end of that week, they had somebody leaving the project, so I kind of slid right in. It was sheer luck. I was right place, right time. And that's how I got involved with the TED project line, which is also known as the 264, the 116, the +4, all of that. So that was the first project that I ended up on. And then after that, since we had already done a project, knew what to do, as Jack Tramiel left, there was a void, and so this is probably one of the few times, if any, where the engineers suggested a product, designed it up and shoved it out into production, since marketing wasn't telling us what to do, and management. And that's what the 128 was. It was kind of the bastard child right off the workbench of the engineering department.
So, how did you, let us know, how did you start working for Commodore? How were you actually hired?
Well, I was hired, two people, Bob Russell and Frank Hughes. It was their turn in the bucket, as we say, to go to what you would do is work all day long, and then you would go to the headhunters till about 10 or 11 o'clock at night and interview people on a continuous stream. And I met first with Frank Hughes, and I blew it. He didn't like me. I was trying real hard to be liked. And but then when I got in with Bob Russell, at one point Bob started saying something, and he said, well, if you load X immediate 02, and I'm under my breath, I'm going 8502. And he looks at me and he starts saying more assembler code, and I start saying the machine code back to him. And then in the interview was over, he says, well, I think we'll have you come in. And so that's kind of how I got to the plant. The way he had invited me, though, I didn't know I was going to be interviewed again, so I didn't bring my resume when I went to Commodore. So here it is again. I'm not getting hired because I didn't bring a resume. And this time Frank Hughes stepped in and said, no, wait, I've got his resume. And You know, and then I started hitting it off with Shiraz Shivdi, the head of the department and stuff. And so, I mean, it's just real narrow the way I made it in there. So, and as far as then Dave Haynie, the way he got hired was it was my turn in the bucket, and he comes into the headhunter. And this time I'm the only one out in the office because they're doing something with my boss. And he sits down in a homemade shirt, and he's like young and energetic. And he's like, "Well, are you here for the job?" I said, "Something like that." So I started asking him. I'm like, "Well, why are you quitting GE?" And he's like, "I hate writing missile code. You know, don't want to kill people." So I have him completely interviewed before he even goes in to be interviewed. He didn't know it, but he was already hired at that point. I had interviewed him out in the lobby. So and here it was, the exact same chair I was sitting in when I had gotten hired at the end of the day.
Oh, right. Good.
So, yeah, a lot of little things in there. You'll find I don't have short answers unless you tell me to give you a short answer.
Oh, it's fine. So, tell us, you said you were hired to do the software, but you were actually ending up being the engineer for the hardware, kind of.
Yeah, well, I was hired as a technician, I think. You know, not as a hardware engineer, but when I got there, Benny Pruden was out that week, and so they put me in Benny's chair and they dropped off a huge stack of things and said, "Read this. You're our new programmer for disk drives." I'm like, you know, I didn't care. Back then I could do it all. These days I only do hardware. But yeah. So and then hang on a second. Let me show you something.
Okay.
So the way I got to be on the TED, or what's called the +4, is this is a board I just found just the other day, and I was working on this at home. And what it is a 6800 processor, and it was a 6845 video processor. I have my own DRAMs here. I saved my money for like 3 months to buy 64K of DRAM because they cost like $99 in 1970. And what I did was I did all these cuts and jumpers to make it share the video bus, you know, just like the 64s do, where it's processor, video, because the way that board was designed, it would wait till the vertical time and do processor, and then it would stop and then let the video go for the rest of the time. So I mentioned that. I said, "Oh, are you doing that thing where you bus split and do that?" And they're like, "Yeah, why?" And that's kind of, you know, and it's like I remember somebody went and got Shiraz or something, and so they kind of asked me a couple more questions, and then Shiraz leaves. I didn't know it. I just became the engineer on the +4, or, you know, the TED. So, and it's because I had done that at home, you know, and I had already had the experience. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. So how was it actually to work on the +4 and the other models? Because I wonder. By history, it was told to us that they were not so successful, not as successful as the C64 or even the 128.
Yeah. You have to watch your definition of success. Everybody compares it to the Commodore 64, and there will never, ever be a Commodore 64 again. That was a great machine. And it sold 27 million. You couldn't sell 27 million of it, and up until the iPad sold 27 million, there was never a single thing, one item, one model that sold that many before. So you can't, the market's now full of it. You can't sell again into that. It's kind of like having an older brother that you get compared against. But the 128, like I said, we had to have something, you know, for the CES show. There was a void of no product. The Amiga was coming. So we shoved a product in there, and literally, like I said, we designed it ourselves and shoved it out there. But the 128 sold about $1.2 billion worth of revenue. It's like something like 5.5 million, something like that. That's not a bad day, you know. When you had, it took it 3 years, but that was you know, 1.2 billion is not a bad failure if it's a failure. And the +4 failed because it had been the 264, and it had been Jack Tramiel's idea and Jack Tramiel's driving force. And I believe it would have succeeded with Jack Tramiel. And, you know, we had a speaking version of it called the 364. Dave probably mentioned it, where we had the TI Speak and Spell guys now worked for us, and they made a talking computer in 1984. But what happened, and if you watch my video from Vintage Computer Festival 2 years ago, I hold up a computer and say, does this look like a Commodore 64? And, you know, I'm holding the +4. And everybody goes, no. And then as we go through it, and then finally we get to the, you know, on the C116. Finally, when I hold up a C16, I said, does this look like a Commodore 64? And everybody goes, yes. I said, that was Commodore's problem. They only know how to sell the Commodore 64, and they only wanted to sell the, so they tried to make the +4 into the Commodore 64. You know, in mentally thinking. They didn't think they needed to go after a new market. They tried to sell into the same market again, but they didn't want to step on the 64's feet. So they put in that bad software. Well, it's not bad software. I shouldn't do that to the guy that wrote it. But they put in the overpriced software and tried to sell it for $3.99. I had designed it to sell for $79. And it's just, and it was supposed to be to the business people. It's a text display. That's what TED means. So it was literally the rudder had come off the ship at that point, and we were just going in circles around the time of the +4. So it's sad too, because the 116 you know, was designed to sell for $49, and you know, to this day I still have people from Romania as one, and Poland, and some of the other countries in there where they were. When we went to dump all these computers, they ended up going to the schools in these areas. So I get a lot of people from overseas tell me they learned on a +4 computer coding and stuff. So it's interesting. It wasn't a hit here. It seems like it was bigger hit, you know, bigger sales overseas. So,
especially East Europe, because
yes, especially Europe. Yeah. Absolutely. And people tell me 4th grade, you know, at school, that's when they saw their first computer, and it was a you know, +4 or a 116 or a C16. So, yeah. So no, I don't mind. We didn't say, oh, if we don't sell as many as the 64, we'll fail. No. Our goals were get a computer out. You know what? We sold people that already had a 64. If I got you to buy a 128, I sold to you twice. That's not a bad, you know, so that was part of the mission, you know, sell twice to these people, and maybe offer just enough other stuff that they'll buy one where they hadn't bought a 64. So we were talking about a 64 saturated market, and, you know, still did, you know, 1.2 billion revenue when we were done. So, but you know what? Not a single one of us, I don't want to say cared whether it was accepted. That wasn't our job to worry about it. Our job was to make it work once we said this is what it looks like. And they could have said not a single one was bought, but there was no failures, then I would have been okay. You know, but they say we can't sell them because they're failing. No, that's the thing that's unacceptable. So.
And I think in the book you also mentioned the Spectacular Rise and Fall of Commodore from Brian Bagnall. It was also a statement from you guys that the big problem was it was not backwards compatible, so that you would need buy new programs, and this is what you saw as a backdrop and the reason why people wouldn't buy it. Like, why would I buy another computer if I need new software for it?
Right, especially if the software didn't exist, because the programmers were saying the same thing. Why should I write for a new program for a new? And again, without Jack Tramiel there, Jack Tramiel would have called up. In my mind, he would have called up 10 different shops and said, you will write some code, some business code for this, or you're not getting something back from us. You know, he would have told them what to do, I think. And we would have got the ball rolling on new software, business software, spreadsheets, you know, that kind, editors, that kind of thing. So without him there, then, yes, it just sat there and looked like a bad 64. So, and that did happen. I went to my first CES show, and me and Terry Ryan, the guy that wrote BASIC, we're walking around, and a woman saw we were from Commodore, and she showed us the program where it was a kid's program, and this little fuzzy thing goes through a tunnel. If you get the math right, and it gets all happy and stuff. And then she just turned and looked and said, "This won't run on your newest computer." I was like, wow, you know, I felt bad, you know, for this, because this woman, obviously, she was her own business. So that was kind of, when we did the 128, doing the C64 mode was kind of a way of giving back to the users, too. If we can give you that, you know, where you can still use your programs, then we'd be more than happy to do that. So, and then it turned into a fiasco, because then marketing decided that it was 100% compatible, and we never said that. They said that, so we said, well, okay, we'll try.
Well, up to date, there are still some programs that don't run on it.
That's right. That's
very
right.
Exotic thing.
We didn't find the first program till after we were already in production. It was Escape from Fractalis was the first one we saw that didn't run. So at the end of the day, it's not like we sold less because of Escape from Fractalis didn't work and a few others. Had it been broken before production, I would have fixed it. But after production, you know, it's kind of like our job. You know, our job of threading the needle is already done. You don't go backwards and open up the design again. You know, you go on to a new design. But the Escape from Fractalis bug, I would never have thought would happen. And usually, I'm more paranoid. I'm you know, so paranoid that I could outthink the users sometimes. But here's a block of VIC code, and you know, starting with like 2928, 2726, and instead of writing a decrementing loop down, the person went this way 256 times and finally initialized the VIC chip after writing 200 bad locations. I didn't write it for you to go the wrong way and write garbage for 200 locations before you got into the VIC area. And it's, you know, I had thought to make that register go away and never come back. Right? I remember the 2 seconds when I made the mistake of, you know, that resulted in Escape from Fractalis. And basically what went through my mind was, what happens if we start getting them where they're in the mode where that register goes away and we can't get the register back? What if we can't tell the difference between a soft boot, a hard boot, and a power on, which is a problem in 64s. We don't have that kind of sensor. And I'm like, oh Christ, that'd be a showstopper if the register goes away and never comes back. So I decided to leave the register there and hope nobody wrote to it, and I got burnt. So, but I'd still made the same decision, you know, today. So somebody over on the CBM hackers thing just said, well, you could have put an extra pin on the MMU and used an extra pin on the VIC chip, and I'm like, well, I guess I could have, but I didn't have a problem to fix. I wasn't going to add pins for what wasn't a problem at the time.
Yeah. So the problem was also that most C128 were used in the C64 mode. So it's not really like it was really worth to make a 80 columns computer. Or what's your perspective about that?
Well, are you asking why we didn't make it a Super C64 when it was on the 128 platform?
Well, kind of. I mean, when you look at it, it's not really worth it. I mean, most people were buying the 128, but they were never using
the 128 mode
or
right.
The CPM mode, because CPM was also known to be slow on the machine.
Yeah, we just threw that in. That's a whole story by itself. Where, you know, it's like, can we increase overnight the amount of software on day one? Yeah, well, we'll do it. We're not saying you'll like it. We're saying it'll be available, though. You could run WordStar and stuff. The thing with the why buy a 128 if you're only going to use it in C64 mode, originally the C128D was supposed to sell at the exact same time. So, and that to me was the computer, because we worked really hard on the regular 128 to make the board fit in both chassis. And there's a big hole in the middle of the board that really was just, we spent hours trying to get the traces around it, days, literally. And it didn't need to be there unless you were building a 128D, but I was so committed that this would work. And we also made it so you could auto-insert it in America or in Japan. They're two different types of tools. We made it. So we were all about getting this thing so it was only done once and done, not various revs of the board. And so the D never came out. I didn't know that till after I'd left, or it didn't come out for years. But the reason we didn't add 80 columns to the C64 mode or add the memory management unit. And I even had somebody come up to me in at one of the shows going, and he said, I would have figured out a way to make the MMU in there. Well, right up until the last minute, we had it in there because we were working with it. So it was a Super 64. And the last rev of the chip, I closed that door and I threw the key away, as we said. And the reason we did it was Fred Bowen mentioned it first. He said, I'm not going to screw up the definition of C64. You know, it's kind of like C64 is nice enough to invite us into their house. Why would we muddy up the place and say, oh, which C64? That C64 or that C64? No. Leave the C64 alone. And we did. I agreed with him. So Fred Bowen thought of it first. And I said, yeah, that makes sense. You know, why have that mode in there? And again, too, I could foresee, you know, we had a lot of problems with rebooting it if you look at the boot circuitry and stuff. I could see it getting stuck in that mode, too. So I didn't have much confidence that we could go down one of these modes and be able to come back and work correctly each time. So, no, we knew what we were doing, sort of, but again, we made the decision at the engineer level. No manager told us to do it or not do it or anything. So
you say after Jack Tramiel left, you had a lot more freedom of what to do? You did, but you didn't necessarily like it. You know, people want to be managed. They want to know that the boat's headed in the right place, you know, for the right shore. And they want to know that everything's going to work well together, including the marketing and sales departments. And, you know, after Jack Tramiel was gone, I remember I saw an article in a paper or something, or an advertisement, and it listed this guy's name. It was Tom Dow. He said, project manager for the Commodore 128. The only problem was I'd never met him. I'm the project manager for the 128. I don't know who that. Well, I turned out to work in sales. He thinks he's the project, and so it was just we really. I mean, there was two different companies with Jack Tramiel and after Jack Tramiel left. So it's and I'm one of that few batch that's been in both. You know, I caught the tail end of one and the beginning of the other. So, yeah. But like I said, how often does a kid get to sit down with a piece of grid paper and write a computer design that goes out and sells millions? That's what did happen to us since there was no down from the top. We just started. We sharpened our pencils and made a design. Great. So tell us a bit about the other computers you did. I think you also did the Commodore 264 and the Commodore 16, which you mentioned earlier.
Right. Yeah, the 264 was the real original computer. Do I have one? Was supposed to be. I've got all my computers put away. I'm sorry, I should have gotten them out. I have a 116 around here somewhere. Maybe we can do an add-on or something. I'll hold up the computers or something down the road. But the 116.
Take a picture. I can insert a picture.
Yeah.
Later.
Oh, the pictures are everywhere. But you know, the 116 was in reaction to the Spectrum, or I mean the was it Spectrum? The Sinclair Spectrum color with that little chiclet keyboards and stuff, and that was supposed to cost $49. And the 264 was what the Plus 4 was when Jack Tramiel was there, and the 364 was the big talking version of it. And I just found one of those boards just the other day, one of the 364 boards. And so the 116, 264, 364 was life as Jack Tramiel saw it. And what happened after he left was we got the Plus 4 because they threw software in it. The 116 went away. The 364, I took it out in the parking lot and beat the crap out of it. And then they invented the the C16 and the 232. You know, they came out of Japan pretty much. And, you know, what they were doing there was one was a single-sided PC board. Picture a computer on a single-sided, not two sides, but one side. And, you know, they reused the case so it was cheap. So, you know, at that point, they're just flogging it. You know, if the expression we have, if beating a dead horse, they were just flogging it, trying to make it look like a Commodore 64 at that point. And they did. So we ended up making like 5 or 6 different computers out of it. Are you familiar with the Commodore LCD? Have you seen that?
Yes, I have read about it. And
yeah.
I saw some pictures of it.
Yeah, yeah, and I have one. And Jeff Porter's got the other two, I think. The LCD was actually what I was working on after the Plus 4 series, and we hired somebody named Jeff Porter who knew a lot about modems and FCC 68, Part 68, Part J, Subpart J or something. And we had something happen where Fred Bowen and I kind of got interested in the 128 together. He had an engineer that wasn't doing very well, and I stopped and helped him one day, and a week later I was on the C128. Actually, it was called a B128 or some. We renamed it the C128, and then Jeff Porter took over the LCD series. But the LCD I had done the initial architecture on, and so when I needed a memory management unit for the 128, I just picked it right up out of the LCD and took it over to the 128. So I'd already done that work, that specification and pinning and everything. So, and the sad part is that the LCD was truly innovative. It was a true new design for something that didn't exist. I mean, we had a beautiful keyboard on this thing, and we owned an LCD company. We were the only source of American glass of LCD. Everything else was overseas. Well, you know, if you own MOS, you can make great chips. Well, I shouldn't say great chips. You can make as many chips as you want, and hopefully a bunch work. But the same with the LCD. So the story goes that Jeff Porter had sold something like 10 or 15,000 of these at a show. He had commitments in hand. And Jeff knew how to tie a tie. None of us did, you know, how to look good and be professional. So he went out and built those links with people to, you know, to actually get real sales. And in spite of that, Marshall Smith, who was supposedly was the CEO of U.S. Steel before he came on to Commodore, except that nobody later could find that he had worked for there, so we don't know where he came from. But after he got with the president of Tandy, which is Radio Shack, and the president of Tandy said there's no market for portable LCD computers. And our guy believed him. And we had things up on the walls that said, no, it's called the competitor, you know. We took advice from somebody else, and then their biggest selling item of Tandy that year, of that next year, was their little LCD computer with the little blue and gold displays. So, if there had been a choice between the 128 and the LCD, we should have done the LCD. You know, that's the thing that would have led a whole new revolution, and it didn't. Instead of the 128 just flogging, you know, the old 64 one last time.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, and you know, that's why I miss the thing with when you had somebody like Jack Tramiel. I could have gone in his office, say it should be the LCD. You know, instead of the 128, I could get fired for it, but at least there was somebody you could say it to. And actually, if you spoke your mind the right way, you know, Jack Tramiel did not mind, is what I've heard. But there was nobody to say that to afterwards, except for Jack or Marshall, and you couldn't talk to him. There's a rumor I punched him at a Christmas party that's only half false.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, actually, I was also talking to Michael Tomczak about this topic with making decisions by Jack Tramiel, and he said that very often they would, or you, or Michael would make suggestions, or his team, about new computers, and Jack would say, no, but I want to do it this way. So if you have A and B, you do B. And then Michael said sometimes it was better to say yes, but instead doing A, and afterwards Jack will be happy that you did something different from what he wanted.
Yeah.
Because you knew it was the right decision.
Yeah, you know, I don't know what Mike Tomczak's role was, you know, because he wasn't in engineering, so I don't know to what all.
He was the marketing manager of the VIC-20 and the C64.
Okay, yeah, and that makes sense. So you know, I don't know what decisions that he's referring to, because my decisions that reach us are, you know, do we have a piece of circuitry in there or something? we argued over where to call the joystick port Joy 0 or Joy 1, because that's the kind of thing we argued about without Jack Tramiel around. But I would not have had Jack Tramiel told me to do something. And I've been in the room when we're demoing we call them dog and pony shows, where where my boss is talking to Jack Tramiel, and I'm in the back shouting answers. So there was a time when I did do that, though, where I didn't do what I was told to do. And that was my boss, Joe, at the time, had told me to screw up the video, the 80 column video coming out of the 128. Because back then, you had both horizontal and vertical video sync going negative at the same time was Apple compatible. And if you had both positive doing it, that was the Tascam or whatever, that compatible. And a lot of the monitors even switched between those two. So he told me to do one of each, to force people to buy Commodore monitors with their 128s. And later he asked me about it, and I said it's taken care of, which meant I didn't do it. So it's as close as I ever got to lying about anything. Well, it is a lie. I did it. And then Joe got laid off not long afterwards. So now, I'm still working there, and he isn't. So I'm free and clear on the decision. But more importantly, the monitor got late and didn't come out for 6 or 7 months after the C128. So nobody would have been able to use the 80 column monitor had I listened to my boss. So, and even in the show, we had to go get monitors off the shelf, for CES shows and stuff. So that was the one time when I did double back on myself there.
I see. You were also mentioning a few minutes ago about the Japanese market. So how was that with the Charzad and so on? Because there's very little known on the European or American user side how you actually did it compatible to the Japanese Charzad. I just saw some screenshots and some things in Vice. So
I'm sorry. What's the question you're asking about? Japanese? Were you talking about the character set?
Charzad, yeah, character set. Right.
Character set. On which models? Where are you asking about the character set in general, or how did we do it?
In general, yeah.
Well, primarily, since we had an office in Japan, and that's the organization Jack Tramiel put together. We had an office in Germany, so we can sell to Germany. We can sell to Europe. We had an office in Japan, so we could work with Japanese vendors, and we could do the high quantity that American, couldn't do in the American market back then. And then the Japan office actually was run by Sam Tramiel when I was there, one of Jack's sons. So they were free and clear to do new keyboard caps and do the ROM codes and all that. I mean, they were engineers there, and they were friends of mine, and we got along. And I'd end up going to Japan, or they'd end up coming to here, and we'd put them up and stuff. So prior to that, we had a lot of infighting between the two buildings, and later we didn't. We got along great. And so that would have been done by the Japan office under somebody named Yoichi Okubo. And then after he left, there was Ray Hughes and Tony Tokai. And they ran those offices, and so it was easy for them to do it, the Carset. So and I forget some of the details because you can only have so many keys on like a 128. So the answer is that they already were who we went to for keycaps, because it was Mitsumi that made our keyboards, and so they would just have them made how they needed to use them. So, and I'm assuming that it was mostly in Ganji, not hiragana or katakana, so it would be Ganji, the more phonetic one.
Interesting. Thank you. So tell us a bit about these ES shows. I was reading stories about that on that book, that Commodore book, that you would have problems getting prototypes to run because the people on the booth would run programs on it and reboot the machines that were not supposed to reboot.
No, we didn't. We only had one instance of that really happening, and it was one of the marketing people. And all I did is I walked up to it and I pressed the 4080 column. You know, if you have a 40 column monitor on it and the 80 column switch is pressed, it'll look like it's not working.
Yeah,
so
because you have to press the monitor switch too. To change
that's the one that they would get wrong. Is they'd sit there and keep rebooting it, and it would be the 4080 column. So that's just learning to live with the fact you have two choices. The CES show went really well. We didn't have any station that didn't work. When at the very beginning, we didn't have enough of the 80 column chips. People coming to the show were bringing me 80 column chips, and we were installing them in the last couple of stations. Then, and we had to do different changes here. I'll try and tell you about all of them if you're interested. So first was getting the 80 column chips, and then the VIC chip had trouble working in multicolor character mode, which is some of the games, unless you turn the voltage down low. But the 80 column chip didn't work very well unless you turn the voltage up high. Well, the 128 power supply was Commodore's first supply that was adjustable, so I carried a little thing, and you know, we would say this station is for the 40 column. You know, it'd have a 40 column display, and we'd adjust the voltage low, and this station was for CPM, and we'd adjust the voltage high. So there was a lot of that going on. But then, you know, once the show started, you know, it went pretty well. The 80 column chip, if you've read some of the past stuff about it, was just a real bear. It would go backwards. It'd get worse on between revs instead of getting better. And the guy who had written CPM or modified CPM for the 128 had been using a different rev than the last one. So they had introduced a new bug, which when they went to scroll the character, it would leave a character behind, and it looked like, you know, the movie Matrix, how the characters, that's what we called it, a rainfall, but that's what it would do. And so what he did, and he's going, what? And nobody told me about this. And, you know, what the chip designer had us do then was, you're supposed to write to the register twice. It listened better if you wrote to it twice in a row. So what he did, he didn't have the big computer with him to recompile CPM. So what he did is he took a disk editor and he rewrote the object code on the disk and then hand calculated the checksum and rewrote it back out to the disk and fixed CPM with a disk editor the night of CES. So that was Von Ertwein did that, and it was just like, you know, at this point our reputations are that we can do anything. And when somebody like Von is rewriting CPM using a disk editor backwards and the sectors are stored backwards, it's just like we were meant to succeed, you know, it felt like. And and then I had to, for the CPM, I had to put external pull-up resistors because it was black on green, it was reverse. And so I put these resistors on there that got physically hot. So they wouldn't have made it much past the CES show, but they did okay during the CES show. And then we kept cans of cold spray around just for jokes, you know, because we used to, you know, say cold spray would fix anything. So, but no, the actual presentation went well. And we even had there's a picture out there. We had a small assembly line upstairs. We took one of the rooms instead of letting marketing have it. And if we brought in a C128, we could open it. We were all lined up, all the engineers. One guy would open it, the next guy would take the shield off, the third guy would put the 80 column chip in it, fourth guy would seal it up and hand it to the disk guy, and he would make sure the disk drive worked and then back out to the floor. And that's how we got all the 80 column ones working, like at 8:30 of the morning of CES show.
Great.
So.
So, no, I forgot my question.
Yeah, I talk a lot. I apologize.
No, it's no problem. Let me think.
So you'd asked about CS and things we'd heard from there.
Yes. Oh, yes. Now I remember. Actually, after the C128 was released, you decided for some reason to release a CPM cartridge and a 18-column cartridge for the C64 as well, but they weren't so successful.
No, I have the memo upstairs actually, where the head of production is saying the CPM cartridges don't work. And everybody, so this is before the 128 came out, okay? This is one of the background things.
Oh, that was
there was
before.
a CPM cartridge for the C64. They blame thousands of them not working on the VIC chip change. And everybody said, well, it's a timing problem. And they were all wrong. And so when I looked in on it, what it was a voltage level problem. When the 6502 would start and stop and let the, the VIC chip would go like this, and the Z80 would start and stop. It turns out there was a spot it wouldn't stop. It'd go boom, boom, right? Well, if that boom, boom got out onto the DRAMs, it screwed them up. So with one time it's going boom, boom, and it, it's say, I didn't hear that. But with the other brand, you'd hear it. So it was the brand of LS257 multiplexers in there. And we had the same problem in the C128. That's how I know. And we looked at it and said, oh, look, you can't stop the Z80 there. He won't stop between clocks 1 and 2. So that was the problem with the thousands of CPM cartridges for the Commodore 64. But the reason I put a Z80, I did like 3 things when I put the Z80 on the 128. The CPM cartridge needs 0.6 amps. It's a lot of power. I didn't want to make my power supply 0.6 amps bigger for a cartridge that was only going to be used every now and then. But if I built it into it, it only needed like 0.15 amps. So I said, well, we keep the power supply cheaper, and we don't have to worry about the CPM compatibility with the cartridge. And then, like a couple days later, the guy showed up with Magic Voice and plugged it in. And the guys from Texas, speak and spell guys. And all it did was go bleep, bleep, and crashed. Well, it turns out what they were doing was right as the computer would go for the reset vector, they'd swap in their own ROM. Well, wait a minute, it's a 128 going for the vector, not a C64. You don't know how to set up the MMU or anything, and it would crash. So that night, after everybody had left, we got in there and we wired in an inverter, so now the reset line went low instead of high, which made the Z80 turn on first. We hand wrote the code into an EEPROM and put it in there. It said, hey, Z80, if you see the Commodore key held down, go ahead, jump to 64 mode. So by booting it from the Z80 first, we could fix all of the compatibility problems. So you brought the Z80 in to be good citizens, and in the end we were rewarded by having problems fixed. So the Z80 would look out there and go, oh, there's that cartridge, and he would set it up for a 64 mode. So there was a lot of things went into that. I never heard of a CPM cartridge being made after the 128. I don't believe they revved it from what I know. Now, one more thing I'll throw out there. One day I'm going through the folder of the guy whose office I was, inherited when I took over the Plus 4, and I find the schematic of a competitor Z80 card, and that's all the guy had done. He copied somebody else. And so this problem with the start, start, stop was actually a problem in Apple computers also. They had a a Z80 card. They had copied the Z80 card from the Apple. So that's how the problem even got started. So, and that was a find. Go ahead.
What's interesting actually about that CPU is it's still used nowadays sometimes in like MP3 players, and it was also used in the Game Boy, in the first Game Boy.
What, the Z80?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm doing some articles for Hackaday, and I mentioned the Z80. We tried to host world domination with the Z80, but it didn't work. So that's a nice little processor. I had no problem with the Z. The way we got, we didn't stock them because the CPM cartridges were kind of made somewhere else. So the night we built the Z80 into the C128, after I had the technicians wire wrap and stuff, we had to go around and tear open all the Timex Sinclairs. We were using them as door stops.
Yeah.
And we had to tear them open and that's true. I have mine today with the Z80 Mystic. And I'm the one that started the whole doorstop thing, but you wouldn't know it. Once management saw it, they're walking around like zombies looking for Timex Sinclairs to do. And the reason we had it, did they do this in Europe where we said, send us your old computer and we will take off, it was 100 US dollars. But in America, if you send in your old computer, we would sell you a C64 for 200 instead of 300.
Oh, I didn't hear about that in Germany. I don't think we took back our old computers.
That was a big thing for, I mean, it's the genius of Jack Tramiel, right? Because not only did that make he had sold his, sales were starting to go down for $300, so he lowers the price to $200, but he gets all the competitors' computers off the street. So by virtue, they literally, we had skids full of them in downstairs and receiving of all these computers. I got my Kim 1 card is from there. And so what happened was a guy named Yash Terakura had him bring up a skid into engineering. And so that's where we got people were sending us brand new Timex Sinclair, still in the box. They'd spend $50 on it, send it to us, and we'd give them $100 off. So that's why we had all these.
This way he got the new computer cheaper.
Right.
And
right.
He didn't even try the competitor computer before.
Right. And then after a while, Jack just knocked $100 off after people slowed down on sending us the computers. But during this time, the TI-99 had a problem that kept it from production. Its transformer would get too hot, and the insulation would drip out, and it would become electrically charged. And so they had to take 6 months off to fix it, get through UL again and everything. And during that time, all these TI-99s are being sent to us and being thrown on a skid. That when they went back to try and sell them, I don't think they had the market left anymore. We had converted them to Commodore 64 users.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, Jack Tramiel is just in my mind a genius at this kind of thing. When he said war is hell, that this is war, he meant it.
Well, talking about Jack, Chuck mentioned that he thinks the main reason why Commodore failed was also that there was always this mind computer for the masses, not the classes, while Chuck said there should have been a second line for professional computers, like MS-DOS. We did that, Commodore did release MS-DOS computer clones in Germany, but not in USA.
I think we released some here. There are people like Greg Berlin, Dave Haynie, and Jeff Franks, I thought, did a PC, because we had the guy from PC Junior was head of engineering for a while or something, and the only reason I know this is I would go to lunch with the guys. I was gone by his time, but they were saying that the memo came out that says the next person that calls it a PC Junior is fired, because they just would pick on him. But I think what you just said, I didn't know he said that, but that goes along with the TED, right? A business machine, that's what he wanted to make it into. So we had 121 colors, but no sprites. Well, wait, you can make great paintings, still things. It's just not a game player. You want to play games, get a Commodore 64. So the +4 was a step forward. I mean, who else had 121 colors at the time? And the answer was, I don't think anybody. Even CompuColor didn't have that many. So, in a single chip sound and video, nobody had done that. And that's what the TED chip does. It was the sound processor also. But it makes sense if you market it that way, and it makes horrible sense if you're selling into the C64 market. It's like a bad VIC chip then at that point.
So do you think that if Commodore made 2 production lines, one for the end users and one for the business users, that the company would still be around?
Well, if Jack Tramiel hadn't left, we might have succeeded. Because Commodore did have the D line and the B line and the P line, and the C128 was called a P128 or something before I got involved and I said, well, if we're going to make it C64 compatible, let's call it a C120. You know, again, that came from the engineers, what to call it. But there was these business machines, but the I didn't mess with them much. You know, I mean, there was PETs. We all knew the PET, but there's these other ones that have all rounded. They were designed by Ira Vilinsky. You can see his design style in there. But I don't know how many they sold of those things. They were more like PCs, and in that they had a lot of chips in them. They made a lot of heat, and they were expensive. So I don't think they developed that market well, but I think the TED would have. You know, the +4.
Then they would still be around.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, after when Jack Tramiel and his sons went to Atari, and then, you know, and I'm not around for this time, so I've only heard about it, but, you know, Commodore has the Amiga, they had the Jaguar, we're fighting real hard. I mean, it's not helping anybody, they're suing each other and stuff. I mean, we're saying the engineers threw everything in the shredder before they left to join them, and they're saying, hey, wait a minute, Amiga had agreed to work with us, and then you got them, so they violated their contract. And at the end of the day, that's when DOS kind of just, you know, they're locked in a death struggle, and DOS came around the corner and just kept going down the road. I think, and I only figured this out recently, so you know, after 30 years, because I wondered why Commodore failed. And I knew Commodore's marketing department, even the Amiga. I had seen the marketing department, you know, kick back and go, oh, you know, that C128 will sell better in the +4 without us doing anything. Oh, it's not selling better. Well, that Amiga will sell itself, and they're sitting there, and of course the Amiga couldn't sell itself. You had it, you know, I saw only 2 commercials for the Amiga the entire time, you know, on TV, and so we weren't marketing them. So the problem that I think the Amiga and the Jaguar developed, or certainly the Amiga, was it was made to look really good on a TV set. The hold and modify mode, you know, where you put out a color and then you can modify the shade. It was breathtaking. It was, you know, innovative. People weren't using their TV sets anymore. You know, when you bought an Amiga, you bought a monitor, right? So it was made to look, well, look, you know what? It looks like crap on the monitor because everything's big and bulky. To, you know, think of the pointer, right? Think of your PC pointer now. It's nice and slick, but that big old, you know, Amiga pointer, and I think that was the problem, is they kept trying to target the TV owners, you know, as a look what we can do, and we're past that point. You know, it's like I have a monitor.
Most people were using the 1084.
1084, yes, absolutely. And so that, I think that's where we got kind of over enthralled with our own cleverness and tried to sell to that market. And you know, and again, if you had had the Amiga chipset out at the same time as the C64, and you did Jack Tramiel marketing the C64, he'd have wiped the floor with anybody, you know, the Amiga and stuff like that. The C64 was still a better computer for doing what it did, you know, made for the masses, a gaming machine. So I think it would have done better in the Amiga. Well, it did, but I mean, even one-on-one.
Why did you actually leave Commodore?
Well, I was young and stupid, and I saw that I thought we were going to go under in the engineering. Everybody had fled, including, you know, I made some enemies because I was all about getting the job done, and if I had to walk right over you, I'd ask you to move first, and then I'd walk over you. And so my guardian angels had all left, you know, and so I'm walking around with a bullseye on me. But that really wasn't the reason. I never worried about losing my job, not a day that I was there. I worried about not getting the product finished, but I never worried about losing my job. So what I didn't want to do is be looking for a job at the same time as 60 other engineers if we all got laid off. And so I got offered a job as a director of engineering. So here I'm, you know, 25 years old, director of engineering, and I've never been, you know, highest I ever got was high school. I've never been to college or anything. So it looked like a good thing, and I was addicted to getting products out, to that, just beating ourselves up, getting it out there, taking a couple months off, and then doing it again. And I wrongly thought I could go anywhere and do that. So, I go places and they don't make custom chips. Only Commodore does. So I thought that I could keep things going by changing companies, and I was wrong. And at the end, it was really a bad fit. They couldn't believe what they had in me, because I'd show up barefoot, things like that in the morning. So, yeah, I should have stayed, but I didn't, and that's one of the mistakes I had to learn from when I was young.
But since you left in '86, you were lucky enough to not, experience the time when Commodore went bankrupt. That's at least a positive thing.
And I know very little about that time. And actually, the Vintage Computer Festival, it's going to be held in 2 weeks here on the East Coast. Dave Haynie is going to do the third part and talk about that. Now, I have one of Dave's discs, the Deathbed Vigil.
I have that too.
Yeah. I can't watch it. It's too sad.
You didn't watch it?
No, I put it in for. I still have I've got one still wrapped up. It's too sad. It's like watching your children, be mistreated or something. I hear Greg Berlin's voice come on the thing, and I just shut it off. So,
but it also has also the interview with you and Bob Russell on it. So, as a bonus.
Oh, on the, like in my old office where we're sitting at a big table.
Yeah.
That was I had started an ISP in 1995, and that was my office back then.
But you could still find everything on YouTube. Anyway, and still buy the DVD.
Yeah, I think, I don't know when he stuck that on there, but yeah, because the Deathbed Vigil came out, I think, it's before you could write to DVDs, let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, it has been released on DVD. I actually bought it when Dave was still selling it by himself.
Yeah.
This is how I got in touch with him, by the way, by his PayPal email address.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So tell us a bit, what did you do after? You have been in a couple of companies, I see on your LinkedIn profile, and you have been there 4 years, 3 years, a couple of months, 2 years. So you switched companies quite often.
No, not really. I don't know what they see. I own several of those companies, so we changed the name after. So all the companies that had the word interactive in it are companies I owned, and so no. When I first quit, I went to a company that called CBIT. They did computer-based imaging technology. So I was working with what was the trying to do machine vision in 1985, where the processor works at 1 megahertz versus the gigahertz we have today. And that was interesting, but that was the place where I was doomed. I'd never been laid off before or fired or whatever, but we parted ways there. So that was an experience for me. But then I ended up getting with some other Commodore people, and we did a bunch of stuff. I did some work for Cray Research, which Cray computers back then were like, you'd be out licking if they left you alone with the computer, they'd find you licking it, and I then ended up back in doing machine vision in early 90s, and then I just started my own company in 95, and I've only worked for myself since 1995. So, but and I asked Bob Russell, because if you look at the bunch of people from Commodore, we're all doing stuff like that. We're all nuts, right? And I said, what's wrong with us? I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Deer Hunter. It came out in the 70s. But after these guys go to Vietnam, they come back and they're addicted to playing Russian roulette, right? We were acting like that. I'm like, what's wrong with us? We're broken. And Bob Russell said, well, we're risk takers. That's the atmosphere we came from in Commodore. If you succeeded in Commodore, it was more like you got weeded out. The close group of us had these profiles for taking big risks and working really hard and stuff. So, so no, I've been doing my own thing now, and actually I'm just getting back into electronics. I've been watching the open hardware source stuff. And I'm about to release the website herdware.com after the Easter egg that's hidden. And I'm hoping, as a matter of fact, I'm playing with little boards as I'm talking. what I want to do is teach electronics how I learned it. So there's a summing amplifier. You can see the op amp symbol or the power supply or something.
That's interesting.
And yeah, so that's and I never used one of those. Those wireless breadboards that you push they had the white things with all the rows of holes. Never used one in my life. I take that back. One time I used it to make some LEDs blink on the small Christmas tree on my desk.
There has been released one for the C64 like 8 years ago called the 8-bit baby, actually.
Okay. So yeah, hang on, let me see if I have. Sorry for this, but it's kind of. So, well, I have my glasses on here, but so here's an example of. I don't know if you can see that.
It's a bit dark.
Yeah, it's because I got the lights put out. So there's an example of an op amp with the symbol and all the summing amplifiers and things.
Wow.
And then the way you connect to it is you put on your glasses. And these plug into, they're like solderless breadboard things, but they're laid out for analog. So I can sit there and hook these up, or I can I can put resistors in place of them and stuff. And then these lay out on a grid. You can see the 4 holes. So there's like, here's a power supply, here's this, all these different things have similar footprints. And so that's kind of what I'm playing with these here. The only one that's strange is this is for making analog synthesizers. This is for keypads and stuff. So that's kind of what I'm working on at herdware.com, and then working with Terry Ryan, who wrote BASIC for millions of people. We're doing like a Raspberry Pi internet radio just for the heck of it.
Great.
Yeah, so kind of getting into the open hardware stuff. And that was very weird, because I'm from the days where you protect what you design. You don't give it away.
Yeah.
It's not even yours to give. It belongs to the people that pay your salary.
Yeah.
And now you just you lay it out there and let people improve on it. So I'm kind of bitten by that bug now. So I'm looking to do more of that.
That's interesting, because Ralph Baer, as I spoke about him earlier, he actually is 91 and he still teaches electronics, like what you told me just now. So maybe you should read our interview and watch it, so you can hear about it, or you can see about it.
Yeah, because it's addictive.
And he also said it like you from the old days doing electronics. Yeah.
Yep.
So a lot changed today. But I read, at least on Wikipedia, you are nowadays more into robotics. Or is that outdated information from Wikipedia?
Well, Haney's really into robotics as a profession, but I don't know if he's still working there. But my son has Asperger's syndrome, and so they have a tendency to get fixated on something. And at one point, it looked like robotics would be it. And I dove straight into robotics. I mean, he likes Star Wars, so I spent like $1,000 on in the place where they sell the hexapod. I forget the name of the company, and he wandered off, and now he's just into Legos. He does. It's easier to do. So, but I got really into into robotics. Because of my son, I was hoping that because there's hardware, there's software, there's mechanics, there's doing things with his hands and stuff. So that was kind of why I was at that for a while. And I'm hoping that the stuff we're doing, with the new hardware stuff, that can be used for robotics. So.
Okay. But you're not only known for that new project now, but you also run the homepage c128.com, right?
Yes.
So that's kind of a portal for news and users from that computer?
Yeah, for all Commodore things, really, it's just kind of it's a forum where I can put up some of the old stories, or people actually show us what they're doing. You know, they've got a lot of products came out for the Commodore after Commodore, and they'll ask me, well, what about the CMD version? Well, I've never seen it. You know, I worked at Commodore and then I didn't, but I didn't go through a phase of all. So it's really interesting, all the different, the different operating systems, and they try speeder upper cards and RAM expanders and stuff. So it's kind of a place where people can talk about that at c128.com.
How about your time after Commodore? Did you actually follow people who became famous because of the Commodore computers that were released? For example, composers like Rob Hubbard or Jerome Tal?
No, back then we didn't have the internet, and it just if you didn't have a phone number, how would you get a hold of somebody? And so once I fell out of the circle of Commodore, I literally could have dropped dead and nobody had known. You know, there wasn't any way to to Twitter or Facebook or email or.
But what I mean is, did you follow the market while you were working on Commodore? Like, oh, now I released that, and now there is this software released for our computer, and people are getting famous because they are working on stuff for our systems and so on. Did you ever have this perspective of what you did to people, or how did you change their life? Or
yeah, our job was to give them that format to do that. You know, I've called like the 128. I've called it 9 pounds of poop in a 5-pound bag, because there's an old saying about 10 pounds of poop. Well, we couldn't get 10 to fit, so I got 9 in there, and that was really what we did. We shoved everything in we could, and we leave it to the people to figure out how to use it. You know, do what they want to do. So, if somebody got famous or something, more power to them. We'd love to hear that, But with that said, that's still them being successful. Our job was just to give them the tool. Is the way we looked at it.
So you are still in touch with the community over your website and your Facebook and so on?
Well, yeah. Now that the internet is among it, and that's why I started an ISP in 1995. Which I've since sold. But I recognized that we could, I recognized for what it was, and of course it was all 28.8 baud modems back then and stuff. So now, yeah, we get together for reunions about every 3 years, and no other place I worked do we all get together 25, 30 years later, and we're still the best of friends. It feels like, these are still people I trust or would do anything for. I have to watch saying that because they might call me up and ask me to mow the lawn or something. But, if anybody from the old days ever needed anything, I'd be over there in a second, because we're still really tight.
So you are also meeting up with people you didn't know that were coming before or after you?
After, yeah. I didn't even know who they were. I was at Dave Haynie's house. I wondered who all these people were. And it wasn't till I listened to Dave when he was being interviewed for the Amiga video that Zach is coming out with. Zachary?
Yes, that documentary
about
movie.
The Amiga, right? So I was in the room when Dave did his interview, and I go, oh, that's who all those people were. They're from that last phase. That I never, and they're actually the people that I think they call themselves Commodorians.
Yeah,
before then we were Commodorites.
That is a term I was using.
Yeah, but there's actually some truth to it. The later crowd called themselves a slight difference from what we called ourselves, so that's how we could tell us apart.
So would you say that the Commodore time is still the best time you had job-wise?
Yeah, best time of my life. Yeah, it was a great time to be young and ferocious, and just the world was our oyster. I didn't sleep maybe 3 hours a night. It was just, and I often tell people there was like intellectual testosterone. You got smarter by being in the room with these people. You would up your game to the level of the room, and then the level of the room would go up. So I've never been as smart as when I worked there. Now I'm an idiot compared to the kind of things I could memorize back then.
And there are two interesting stories about you that I heard a couple of times. Is first, people were saying that you still look like back then in a way, or you age pretty low, like people could never tell how.
Well, I
old
had
you
long
were.
hair, so I can never look like I did with the long hair. So that's why I shave my head. Is at least I have something to say about my hair if I'm shaving it off. Otherwise, I'd be at the mercy of it. So no, I used to have glasses and long hair, so I don't think. And I've had people. There was a girl I lived with for 7 years, and she didn't recognize me at all at one point. So I look a lot different.
Yeah, but not since the recent years.
No, not the recent. And matter of fact, somebody said, "Hi, Bill," and I said, "How'd you know it was me?" Because I had to say it's me, Bill. They said the way you walk. So I still walk the same way. You know,
Wow.
I used to be in the Army, so I walk, like that. And when you have long hair, you kind of get a flow going to it and stuff. But no, it's
The second thing I heard about you is that you had a lot of temperature and temper, and you were actually hitting a hole into a wall or something at Commodore.
okay.
When you
The
got
hole.
very angry.
No, wasn't angry a bit. The hole in the wall. I'll go and tell you the story here. We had gotten new offices and stuff, and we would work in there all weekend and all night, and they would turn off the hot water at night, and on the weekends they turned off the air conditioners. So while working in this room, my sweat would actually drip onto the board, and I'd have to it'd fail and stuff. So then you come in Saturday morning, and they lock the door to my lab, my personal lab with the 128s on the inside. So we climbed up and over the wall, get that white stuff all over you from the ceiling, and we put a sign that said, and by the way, they were still installing doors, so there was no key. They were going to give us the keys all at once. So the security guard locks doors even though there's no key. So I put a sign that says, "Please don't lock this door. There's no key." And then the next weekend, doors locked again. I think it was just the Sunday, just the very next day. And I had to crawl over again and back into there, and I put up a sign that said, "Stop locking the door. There's no key. Next time it's locked." And they said I did it in one punch, but it was two. I just punched right next to the door. I punched a hole and then punched it the rest of the way through and reached in and unlocked the door. So now I got the white stuff on my arm, right? Do you know that even with a hole right next to the door, they still locked the door? I had to put a sign up saying, "Stop locking the fucking door. I'm getting white stuff on my arm when I reach through the hole." So they're still locking the door even though there's a hole. So that's what the hole was for, was to unlock the door. And then there was another hole, but it was a technician that made the hole. I just helped him. We used to play a game of see if you can get Bill to throw coffee on himself, because I was real high-strung, right? And if you acted like you were going to punch me, I would throw the coffee and try and block. Well, they learned they could get me to throw the coffee on myself. Well, I learned to throw the coffee on them. So that stopped. But then they started doing this other thing. And the guy, he was one of the technicians, had done a fake at me. And I waited, I counted 1.5 steps, and I turned around, I grabbed him between steps so he's off balance, and I threw him into the wall. And he broke right through the wall, and we could see the backsides of the men's urinals in the bathroom, which I've never seen the backside of a urinal. And the guy, he's like this. He's sunk into the wall, with all this, and the security cameras are starting to go like this. And so that was the other hole in the wall. Was I used a technician to put a hole in the wall, but it's only because he was off balance. He shouldn't have fallen that easily, I figure. So no, I was known for rowdy. I got into it one time. It was all in play, but the vice president named Lloyd Taylor, big guy, everybody was real afraid of him. And then one day they hear us banging against the wall, and I've got Lloyd's knee, and I'm pulling up on it. And he's slamming me against the wall, and we're giggling. His shirt tails are out, and it's like, Bill's beating up the vice president. What's going on here? And then they realize we're laughing while we're doing it.
So you had a lot of fun.
Yeah, work hard, play hard. Yeah. we would run out to the bar at the last minute, and they would wait for us, and they'd like fill the pitchers. And during the day we would go there to get away from the telephones, because remember, there's no cell phones or anything back then. And a lot of the drawings had rings on the corners where we would use beer mugs to hold down the schematics and stuff. And we would and they knew us. They would put us in the back of the bar, and we would sit back there and work and stuff. So yeah, work hard, play hard. That testosterone thing again.
What's your best experience in your period of working at Commodore?
There's a moment that I remember really well. My favorite song back then was Salisbury Hill by Peter Gabriel. And if you listen to it, that's kind of the way we felt. And we would call into the local radio station, and they would play it for the guys at Commodore. And so it's the night before we leave for CES show. Well, it's actually now it's morning time, right?
What year?
What's that?
What year?
It would be 1985.
Okay.
1984, about to become 1985. So it's the C128 CES show. So we've worked every day. I worked on Christmas. I worked on Thanksgiving. I worked every day to get ready. And it's now about 3 in the morning, and we're driving to where the van's going to pick us up to get on the airplane to go to Las Vegas. And I had never known there was a live version of Peter Gabriel's Salisbury Hill. So suddenly that comes on the radio. During the 10 minutes, the 8 minutes it takes to drive to there, the song was 7 minutes long, and I got to hear all of it. And it was that was like an omen. It's my favorite song came on. And so as we stood that morning, all in the dark, waiting to go to the Commodore CES show, and then you just hear a beer open. And somebody said, "Bill's here," because I had beer in my pockets. So, and it was just, we made the show. In other words, we were going to go have a good show and enjoy ourselves. So
what would you make different nowadays, except from leaving Commodore or not leaving Commodore?
Well, the biggest difference is I haven't had a drink since May 29th of 1990. So I'm a recovering alcoholic, and that's the biggest difference. And what we noticed about the people at Commodore, of the group I ran with, it was the same group that got everything done over and over again. About 50% of us turned out to be alcoholics. And so the question is, does working at Commodore make you into an alcoholic, or did you have to be an alcoholic to succeed at Commodore? And the answer is probably both. We fed each other and stuff. So, but that's the biggest difference in my life, is I avoid that. I live out in the country, and I do these kind of things, and I stay away from people. I mean, a little bit I talk with them and stuff, but that's the biggest difference since I was then. You couldn't be as wild and crazy. I broke my hand like 3 times. You just can't be. So here's what I did last year. Can you see that? I tore a finger off.
Yeah.
I caught my wedding ring on something. I used to work in a trauma center. So here you go. So I quit drinking, and I'm addicted to stress and stuff from working at Commodore. So I go down and I get a job at Cooper Trauma Center, and I'm unloading the helicopter for all of South Jersey, doing traumas and medical. I was a captain of a rescue squad and stuff. So that was a way to get all the stress you wanted without having to drink. As a matter of fact, you don't drink while doing medical stuff.
Of course.
So yeah, so that was it. So when I tore my finger off, I just looked at it and said, "Yeah, I figured that's what happened," and it stripped it right off the bone. So it was now I was treating myself as the patient.
So do you think this family feeling is the reason why you Commodores or Commodorians or whatever are so willingly to be interviewed and share your stories about how you generated the computers and the home video or home computer industry? I mean, you kind of founded it. Is that the reason why? Because you were a big family? Because if you try to interview other people, it's mostly more harder to get agreement,
Yeah, there's some guys. I won't name their names now, but they're good friends. But they say that was a period in our life and it's over with, and I don't need to talk about it. And they can be real bitches about it. I'm like, come on, I try to get them talking about it. But you mentioned Haney. Haney and we were like, I call us the whores. We were the first ones out to start talking, a bunch and stuff. And so I think some other people followed, and it's kind of like therapy. You have to go through the fact that we were on the summit and now aren't, and we have survivor's guilt and things like that.
One of my last questions would be, how did you experience the history of home computing? I mean, people were until recently mostly taught at school and university that Apple did the first home computer.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
It's Commodore. And actually, I figured when Jack Tramiel died 3 years ago, finally he got the recognition, he and Commodore, for making the first affordable home computers, and not Apple.
Yeah, isn't that something? To the victors get to rewrite history, and what we have a phrase for it. It's well, I forget what we call it, but it's where they rewrite the history part of it, and we have already talked a little bit about some of the abilities of some of the. But people go, oh, Apple. Well, wait a minute. I sold more than the Apple II, with just the 128, right? And we made the processors that they use. They're just hooking our chips together. Yeah, meanwhile, we're out making chips like VIC chips and stuff.
Too. You still have chips to Apple.
Yeah, and if we were still around, then history wouldn't be as overwritten. But you see like one of the designers of an Apple on TV and stuff, and well, wait a minute, he only worked there 2 years himself. Chuck Peddle is one of my heroes, and he's the guy that designed. He's the guy that, in my mind, said, "Look, let's take this board that's this big and make a chip, right?" And Motorola said, "No, we won't make the billions of dollars." And Chuck said, as he put it, "I've been kicked out of better places than that." So those are the heroes, the people that did the 6502 and stuff. And then the Yanis and Charpentier that does the Winterable, that did the other chip. Bill Mensch was on the 02 team, but then did the SID and the VIC chip. So now we've got this triad of ingenuity, between the SID, the VIC, and the 02, and we owned that space. And these guys hooked some stuff together. Because the iPod sold, right, when Apple was on the skids, because the iPod sold, they're now the people that started the home computer industry. So, and you know what? It used to be I could say, well, remember Commodore from 10 years ago? Well, now it's so far back that I'd have to talk to the parents of, these people weren't even alive when the Commodore was out there, right?
True.
So the people, they just don't know. And that's fine. That's the way history goes.
So you are kind of happy that now things are getting bit by bit corrected?
Well, I don't think they're getting corrected. You're only getting in circles where people are interested in this kind of thing. Some things get known, but we're dying off now. The people that were Jack Tramiel, unfortunate passing. But then some of the Commodore people have passed away, and so in the next 10 years we'll all be gone or real old, one of the two. So yeah, now they let Apple. They can say they invented the home computer market, hooking our chips together if they want.
About getting old, do you plan to continue till the end? I mean, even Chuck Peddle is still inventing new stuff in the computer design industry area.
Well, that's why I'm starting the herdware.com, is to create a vehicle for being able to release designs and sell some kits and stuff. Mm-hmm. It's part of the problem when you're a business owner is there was a time when I could have retired, but I kept playing the game. And I lost that retirement, so I'll probably be working the rest of my life. So the good news is I can do electronics, remotely, and do designs and upload them and download them and stuff.
So you will be a second Ralph Baer at 91, still working.
Oh yeah, who knows? It's you know, it feels like I'm only running on 8% brain power, so you know, it's just kind of watching the curve there. My life expectancy and my brain power cross at some point.
So let me ask you, because I asked this everybody I interviewed recently, what do you think is the next big thing in our lives that will change? That will make a change. Chuck Peddle, for example, said it was robotics, while Raspberry said it would be interactive television. In which direction do you think the future will go?
You know, I don't have a good answer for that right now. In the past, I've made predictions that there would be that refrigerators would have IP addresses, and that the UPS truck would have their web address on the side of the truck. You know, and all those came to happen, right? But I don't know of any real long from here. You know, at some point, we're going to break the barrier where computers start getting smarter, you know, logarithmically, and I don't know what that point will be. You know, maybe about the time we cure cancer and people live long enough to really keep designing all their lives or something. But I don't know what that'll be right now. I still feel like a kid in the store when it comes to the open source stuff. You know, I'm still learning. That's how I hooked up with Hackaday and stuff, is because I was hanging around the edges going, you know, trying to understand this new model for, you know, learning electronics with Arduinos, just everybody sitting at home, versus, you know, I had to fix TVs to learn electronics. Yeah.
So you are staying surprised and look forward to what's going to happen.
Yeah, I am. I literally can't say for sure what's going to happen. So it's I kind of hang on and see. So you have so many. There's so much stuff you did and so many things you were involved with. Is there anything I missed that you would like to add? No, I think we hit about, you know, I've got like a handful of stories I tell and stuff, and there's never a new story. That's the problem with telling the truth, is there's no new stories, just the old ones. But I think we hit on a lot of it. You know, it was, you know, to me, the time when we were at Commodore with Jack Tramiel at the lead, I call that Camelot, after the English, you know, fairy tales of you know, when life was beautiful and wonderful, and then we fell into a gray time, hard time, and you know, and now we're here. So.
No, there's nothing I missed.
No, you pretty much got it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so so I would end the recording here, and
yep.
So thank you for allowing us to interview you. It was a real pleasure to talk to you. And I hope your project with your teaching and so on will be successful.
Well, thank you very much, and it was a blast talking with you.
Thank you.
You know, it's hard to find somebody that even knows about some of this old stuff anymore. So, how old were you when the Commodore 64 came out?
I was born.
Yeah.
So I'm 32 since last Saturday.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I turned 55 last week also. So, yeah. So how did you come to know about this? Well, you had to find out, right, and study, because.
Yeah, well, my grandfather gave me a C64 for Christmas. This is how I got it.
Okay. Yeah.
In 1990, when I was 8. This is how I started.
Best home computer ever made, Commodore 64.
Yeah, well, the last ones that were sold in Germany were actually in 1995 at the Dweller store.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, because different factions were free to still produce, you know, like the cost reduce and stuff like that. So
exactly.
Yeah, I looked at the schematic the other day because somebody was asking a question. I forgot just how dirty we did things back then. There's like a power resistor from the 12 volts over to the doubler hanging off the 5 volts, try and get 8 up to 12, and you know, and all that because the clock noise was getting in the video and stuff. So it's a wonder they work. They actually don't work, the DRAMs in the 64.
Well, the worst two stories I ever heard about Commodore was that the first power supply for the C64 caused fire on curtains in people's living rooms.
Vic 20. That was the Vic 20.
Oh, it was a Vic 20 power supply.
Vic 20. I know the guy that said that was my fault that those curtains caught fire. Yes, that's a true story. It's a Vic 1, I think. Not a Vic 2, but a Vic 1.
Okay.
They put the power supply right in the center. It got way too hot.
And the other story was also from the book from Brian Bagnall, which I don't know who told the story back then. I think it was maybe Chuck Paddle, that they were out. No, it wasn't, because it was for the C64. Anyway, you were out of parts, and you had to take the parts from the garbage bin where the parts were in that were broken to get all the units to fulfill the demand. So
I know. It's me that said that. It was all about getting the computer under the Christmas tree, as we said. And when I first joined, engineers were not allowed downstairs. They would come, the guards would come and take you back out of the area. And I actually helped break that. I ran into the head of production they went to different bars than we did, and I went to all the bars. So I ran into him and said, what's with it? We can help. We're not the enemy. And in doing so, we did see some things. I know why they didn't want people down there, is you literally would have a cart, a skid of failed computers, C64s that failed QA, and there'd be a sign that said failed, and later it'd just be a skid of computers. The failed sign is gone. And so they would ship those computers, because even if you got one and it was broken, we still got it under the tree by Christmas. You bring it in, we'll fix it for you. So yeah, we shipped bad parts. Yeah, bad computers.
And this way you got around the fine that you would have otherwise to pay for not keeping the contract, I guess.
Well, no, we would have sold less Commodore 64s.
But isn't the cost higher to replace a broken machine than quality assurance?
It was, you sell so many during Christmas that's, if we could have sent you an empty box, knowing that later we could have put a computer in it, we would have. So we did some similar things. We would ship to these 18-wheeler, the big trucks in the parking lot, way off on the edge. They would ship from Commodore to those trucks, and so they're sold, but they're still here. And so that's the kind of thing. And then around Christmas, we take them back out of the trucks and put them in circulation. Except one time they opened it and they were gone. The security guards had been in business for themselves and had been selling out of the truck. Yeah, the FBI had to come in and stuff and take all our security guard out.
Big story. So you were saying earlier that you often have been in Japan and so on. You did cross visits to the other offices?
Yes.
How was that? Tell me a bit about that, because nobody from the Commodore people that I talked to ever told me how that experience was.
So I only went to the Japan office, but I went there at a time when the U.S. would do a design and then Japan would take it and redo it, and in doing so they break things. And honestly, that's why the serial port, Bob Russell had fixed the serial bus. He put wires that it could be in software or hardware. Japan looked at it, thought it was shorted together, and took the trace out, and the serial bus stayed a software serial bus. So that's an example of how the lack of communication would happen. So, but I got sent over there for the +4, or the early days of the TED, and basically I started learning Japanese. So within about a year, I was fairly fluent, but it became kind of our secret engineer's language. So I could sit there and talk about my boss right in front of him, and he doesn't know I'm talking about him. And I'm saying, yes, wait a while, he is getting fired. I would say things like that, and it was true, So that helped a lot. That's when we started actually going back and forth. And so we had them come to us, and that's when we laid out the PC board originally so it could be used in production as well, small runs as well as big runs. We had the Panasert and the Universal tool, things work differently. So we had the Japan office guys came here and laid it out the right way the first time. So that happened, I'd like to say, partially because of my influence on tearing down the borders between the offices. And we also, before then, there had been a lot of finger pointing between like the programmers and the chip developers. And, you know, and they say, oh, it's a bug. No, it's a bad chip. And I called them together and I said, look, he's going to give you anything you ask for. I pointed at the chip guy. And I told the programmers, I said, he will give you everything you ask for right now. He will make that happen in the chip. But later, you're going to have to fix everything that's still broken at the end of the day, because the hardware is done, the chip is done, the only thing we can change is the code. Software. So get used to it. You will be the last fixers. That's just the way it is. And, oh, okay, as long as you know it wasn't us that broke it. No, we know that, but you're the only people that can fix it. Well, so that changed it.
Well, we should mention here that back in the day you couldn't do a firmware update or something to fix code in an EEPROM or something.
Oh, yeah.
That's what you do nowadays.
That's a true story. You're talking about where I stole it? We had the character ROM for the C128. When they actually went to do the Easter egg, where they have our names, when they printed von Ertwein's name, the V had a bar above it. So the character ROM, the reverse V, the character ROM was bad. So the QA department hadn't even hit every key on the keyboard. That's how they missed the Shift Q also, right? So we had this whole brand new QA department. They couldn't find anything. So we're sitting in a meeting, and I'm like, okay, what we're going to do, what we would do is chips in our half lots. We would do the bottom 3 layers of a chip, and then we would set half aside, and we'd run half. And that way, if we needed to fix the top part, we could do that and fix it and be done in half the time. So I'm in a meeting. I'm like, okay, I've got a 1, 2, 3 pulled back. We're going to release the font. And the head of the software guy goes, excuse me, I think I should be the ones doing the release of the character ROMs. You know, obviously you failed the first time. We're like, yeah, whatever. You got to have them done by Tuesday, though. Oh, I'll test them thoroughly. None of that trouble like you had. Well, fine. You get them done. So what it was, if you looked at all the schedules, if the font ROM wasn't done on this date in November, we would miss CES show. Just plain miss it, right?
Okay.
So we get to Friday, and he hasn't moved it. Meanwhile, they had made a memo that said, stop breaking into the offices, and it all but said, Bil Herd, this means you. But they said, if you are caught, no matter who you are, Bil Herd, you will be fired. So I break into his office, because, you know, I got a job to do here. I open his drawer, I take the character ROM out. Monday, I send it off to MOS to be made. It's the last day I have before I can still make my window. So then we go into the next meeting on like Wednesday, and you know, it gets around to this thing that was already supposed to be done. And he said, well, we're still evaluating it and doing the QA like you guys never did. And I looked at him and I said, liar. I said, liar. I said, I broke into your office on Friday, I stole the ROM, and I released it to MOS, and you're telling me that you're still, that's my cat walking through, you're telling me you're still evaluating it when it hasn't been in your desk drawer for 4 days now, or 3 days that I took it. So I admitted I had broken in the office, stolen it, and that's the only way we made our schedule. And so nobody could fire me over it because it was the right thing. But it pissed them off because they wanted the memo to mean they could fire me. So that's a true story.
So
excellent. It's good speaking with you.
Okay, thank you.
Take care. Bye.